Welcome to the Biz Easy podcast, where small business is simplified for greater results. Brought to you by Resources and Development. Go to www.resources-development.com for help in taking your business to the next level. And now, help me welcome the host of the Biz Easy podcast, Steve McCrillis.
Welcome to the Biz Easy podcast, where small business is simplified for greater results. Steve McCrillis has some thoughts today, and he'd like to share. So I'm playing host today. I'm Skip Williams, and here is the greatest business analyst in America, Steve McCrillis.
Wow, what an introduction. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say with that. But, you know, the topic du jour, adjusting a company's culture, does come from our blog collection. But here's a quick story about adjusting your company's culture.
So you are boy George, and you're going to tell us how to build a culture club. Do you really want to hurt me?
Let's go with yes on that, but no in kind. Okay, here goes. Once upon a time, there was an empire that made many demands upon its institution. A candidate, to be included, had insistence placed upon timeliness, thoroughness, expedience, and abject attention. It believed that for an individual so worthy to join its assembly, abiding by a precise doctrine of behavior with a host of specifically outlined rules of conduct was paramount to inclusion. The empire governed with the adage, the beatings won't stop until the morale improves. Sound like any place you've heard?
That sounds a little harsh, Steve, but I do remember having encountered phrases like that, along with do it my way or hit the highway.
Well, and there's a number of other ones. You're absolutely right. And, you know, well, maybe this is a bit overstated, but this short missive described the relationship between the employer, the empire, and the employee, the candidate. It was not uncommon for an employer to feel that an employee should do a good job because they should be happy to have a job. And your reward for your work is your paycheck. Any of these phrases sound familiar to you? Well, have things changed. Welcome to the 21st century. Over the course of generations, the relationship between employer and employee have changed so significantly that the terms corporate social culture and company culture are now part of our everyday lexicon and an important part of our finding a new employer.
And don't you think that employees should be enjoying their work, and there's no reason that employees can't have fun while getting the job done?
Yes, I don't think that many will disagree with that, except, well, let me add this. According to Indeed, a prominent search engine for employment placements, 46% of job seekers who considered a job but did not apply said they ultimately chose not to apply because they didn't feel it would be a good culture fit for them. So almost half of potential employees are willing to state that how they are treated at work will make the decision to apply or not apply. Now, it forces us to ask ourselves, what does a good company culture look like? And more critically, how do we determine if the one you are in currently meets the standard of a good culture?
Seems like good company culture then, Steve, is like a value add in that recruitment message, just like a value add in a marketing message, don't you think?
I agree. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's one of the lessons that you teach when you're coaching our clients. We can all attest to knowing that what a bad culture looks like. Visiting a restaurant, retail store, or any business where employees are obviously unhappy speaks to a poor culture. From where does this stem? Well, over the years, the work duties and responsibilities for companies, aside from automation in most cases, hasn't really changed. However, the way employees or team members, as we now identify employees, has changed if a proper culture is to be achieved. Few people will accept being chastised by a supervisor in the presence of fellow employees, or worse, in front of customers. And I believe that this has become somewhat of a social norm. Now, taking it a step further, we must employ the golden rule, treating others as one wants to be treated, which is not customary from the first number of jobs that I had. I mean, it was always the boss versus the employee.
Yeah, business karma is that two-edged sword, isn't it? It applies to the way you treat customers and the way you treat employees. And when it comes to the employees, man, it seems like they've got plenty of ways to get even.
Yeah, and I don't want to go into a topic like that. So let me ask, where does changing a company culture start? Well, having experienced a wide variety of situations where employees are unhappy, I will tell you without equivocation that changing a company culture starts at the top. The owner, the president, or the CEO. From there, all levels of the organizational structure must participate in a change management initiative to improve two things, two key components. The first one is having a strong leadership initiative. It's an inclusive initiative, having a keen sense of direction for the company and all of its team members. The second is a communication network that allows the dialogue to flow to all members of the team. A leader's greatest achievement is a human and social one, which stems from his understanding of his fellow workers and the relationship of their individual goals to the group goal that they must carry out. Now, his ability to accomplish this is predicated on his ability to communicate, mostly through listening, to the individual to determine both.
So what you're saying is the guy or the woman at the top leads the direction of how the rest of the company acts and reacts to the change and improvements?
Yes. When I used to do surveys, one of the common questions I would ask a business owner is, do you have kids? There was always a stumper when he said no, because then I couldn't use the analogy. But kids learn from their parents. If you happen to be hypertensive, if you happen to be very reactional, if you happen to be very angry, your kids were going to pick up on these characteristics. Such is true in the workplace. If you are this type of person, you don't ask questions, you do become judgmental, you do become overbearing, well, that's going to trickle down through the ranks. Your employees are going to find a way to avoid you and rather than go up against you, because I learned at a very early age, and this comes from that culture, is if whenever you decide you want to have an argument with your boss, you have to consider two sides, his side or the outside.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, please continue.
It is no longer the pay status of the job alone or fear of retribution that motivates people to do their very best or perform at their very, very best for the employer. Without oversimplifying, most people will accomplish more and perform better if they are happy and rewarded accordingly. It's not hard to agree that happy employees are productive employees, and I'm sure that you would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I know personally that I would work for a lot less if I'm happy and I'm valued at work, for sure.
Yeah, with the dynamic changes that have occurred in the employment landscape, more specifically in this century, people will do well at what they do if they feel appreciated for what they do and recognized for what they do. Steve Jobs, and I have controversial feelings about some of the things people write about him, was quoted as saying, "It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do." A collaborative work environment where employees' input and suggestions are solicited without judgment is a workplace where employees can improve, they can grow, and be appreciated. After all, gaining feedback from the people charged to perform a responsibility that they do all day long will logically yield the most valuable feedback, if they're being honest. In theory, they do it all day long, so wouldn't they know exactly all the ins and outs and nuances of the work? This is the communication network I previously mentioned. It has been uncharacteristic.
I was just going to add to that, Steve. It also gives them a sense of job ownership, so that if this job goes wrong, they take responsibility for it rather than passing that responsibility up.
And that is the ideal theory. Absolutely correct. It has been uncharacteristic of management in the past to seek input from their staff, and in so doing, make them partners in the quest. Today, it becomes essential to make a habit of that process through the vehicles of regular performance review and a more integrated people operations initiative. To quote another titan of business, Sir Richard Branson of the Virgin Cash of Businesses says, "A company's employees are its greatest asset, and your people are your product." Again, not sure I read that exactly correctly, but it comes from Sir Richard Branson, so how could it not be true?
He is very employee oriented, for sure.
Yes.
And I think it's true, at least until the robots come and replace us all, don't you? But to your point, it comes down to who do you want representing your company? A disgruntled employee or a happy employee? We've talked about finding employees that are the right fit before. and it sounds like based on what you're saying, we should think a lot about finding the ones that not only fit the job, but also fit the culture.
Well, I think it's become an important part of it. Absolutely. You want harmony. You're going to get more productive employees when you have a lot more harmony that's going on. And it's difficult to gather a group of strangers with very little in common in most cases, other than the fact that we're going to and interested in working at this job to be harmonious. You hope that it works out. But you as a leader and you as a supervisor and you as a staff team supervisor, you work at that. And there's many ways that you can accomplish that by the way that you manage the people as individuals. Our employees today have more access to information at their fingertips than any other time in history. Effective leadership and an organization armed with the notion can realize their own team members are a unique and useful resource for improvement and innovation if they work in that kind of environment. Collaboration of management and team benefits both and effectively accomplishes the reward recognition component of our proper company culture. A part of the new age of employee-employer relationships have evolved a work-life balance, and you've heard that, has also become part of our dialogue in team member satisfaction. While seeking out the WIFM, W-I-I-F-M, which is what's in it for me, from your current staff, and while adding additional staff members, is a message all leadership must consider. As the only thing constant in the universe is change, we must adapt to new expectations to stay relevant and productive business. Then again, you can always choose not to, but it will be so at the peril of your business and largely most of your employees.
Steve, when I was younger, I learned a lesson. And whether you're a manager that works for a larger company or whether you are an owner that, by default is a manager and has to manage people, is you're always managing conflicting imperatives. And this is never more true than when it comes to employees. Employees want one thing, the stockholders want something else, and your customers want a third thing. And there's probably other imperatives as well. And somehow you get paid the big bucks for making sure that everybody gets enough of what they want to be satisfied and happy.
And to continue.
It's not an easy task. You're the ham and the sandwich, right? You're between two sides of, like I say, conflicting imperatives. So that's but it doesn't matter. That's the job we signed up for.
Yes, everything is elective. I've spoken to many people who object to CEOs having inflated incomes, inflated pays. Why should they get paid so much? It's not fair to the rest of us. Well, the truth of the matter is, in entrepreneurship, you are taking all the risk. You are the guy that's standing out in front, borrowing money, perhaps against your house, perhaps your family's future or their vacation, whatever the case. You're taking all the risk. So if he makes the right decision and includes those people that have volunteered, because every employment in this country is volunteer, right? You can volunteer to work at a job. And then once you get in there, you realize, well, I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. I should get paid more. I don't understand that because you made the choice. You can always demonstrate your disagreement with not wanting to do what you do on the job by not doing it and quitting, right? Am I way off base here?
No, that's right. I mean, as an owner or a boss, I've always wanted the input of of the staff that reports to me, because, like you said in your article, that they're the frontline people. They're the people that are encountering this, minute after minute, as opposed to me, who've done it maybe a handful of times. So their input is very, very valuable. But they also need to have some sort of respect for what you've got invested in this thing, right? That if everything goes pear-shaped, then they lose a job, and that's bad. You lose your life savings, your kids' college fund, probably have to claim bankruptcy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention all the years that you worked for probably less than minimum wage getting this business up and going.
Sure. Of the thousands of businesses I've had the good fortune of doing a survey at, I also asked that question. First, when I began to talk to the business owner one-on-one, I'd ask him to shut off the phone, let's close the door so that we can have a private conversation. But often I would hear him during the day answer questions. He'd pick up the phone. Hey, what's going on? Okay. And then he would give the answer to the problem and the person would go on. And I said, let me ask you, what went on there? He would say, well, they had a problem and I just told what they needed to do. I said, would it be of any value to you and to them? This is after he complained about getting these kind of calls all the time. So all these people would call him, ask the question, and he would give them the answer. And then he got annoyed by it. I said, what would it be like if you said to them, well, what would you do? What are you thinking? You're on the spot. You're on the site. What would you do? Listen to the response. If it sounds like what you are about to say, excellent, go for it. Or if you want a little bit tweaking of that, say, I think that sounds good. How about adding this to it? And then tell them a snippet of what you're going to do and let them be the problem solver. Who loses in that situation?
Everybody wins for sure.
Everybody wins. That's right. And your employees begin to learn that, hey, I do go to my boss with solutions, not problems. My dad told me that when I was 14. He said, never go to your boss with problems. You only go with solutions. So think it through. What would you do? Unless you had absolutely clearly no idea, come up with something, because he hires you to work through the problems and do the task as opposed to just asking somebody else for the answer. At least
it's hard, and it's hard for a business owner to do that, because by its own nature of an entrepreneur is usually being a control freak, and you had every idea of how your old boss was doing it wrong and how you were going to do it right this time, and so therefore you want to be involved in every decision. But to your point, you can't be. Eventually you'll be annoyed by it, and lastly the employee learns nothing if you're going to answer it every time, and they'll never take ownership of the job. So
you're right. Being a supervisor in that situation is hard, but you know what's even harder? Replacing your employees every other month.
No kidding, huh?
I mean, if you could do the math on this, what does it cost to train a new employee or to replace an employee? Now, we've always thought about going to your employer and threatening him you give me more money, I'm going to leave. Well, you have to consider, once again, let me see, I got to train somebody to do it all over again. I never advocate that, by the way, just never advocate, unless you can bring more to the table, right?
Right. So, no, right. Exactly. Yeah. No, what that employee's first line should be is, here's what I can do for you. If I got the raise, maybe, but,
yeah. And that kind of just blows our entire thing, because it's not about the money for most employees today. It's not about their team members. It's not about the money.
But to your point, from a business owner's perspective, it is about the money. A lot of it is about the money anyway. And if you can take junior people and raise them up in your image, if you can have a little bit more patience with them, with people, rather than abusing them, if you can nurture these folks, make their job fun to come to work, then you can save a heck of a lot of money in payroll, because you don't have to pay for a person that will put up with your abuse. You don't have to put up with a person. You don't have to pay for a person that will just sit there like a robot and crank it out. So the point to that point is you can save on your payroll by doing the right things.
Well, sure. I did mention it's not about the pay. It is more about the recognition for receiving the pay. Because when you go to your boss, you're looking for recognition that I've done a great job. I've exceeded your expectations. I've magnified my job responsibilities and the pay. And then I remember back in the day, employees would come to me with that kind of request, and then pay evaluations would come around. They get a 10% pay. Well, these people are making $5 an hour, and you're giving 10% increases, 50 cents. But these people related, and I thought, okay, that's lovely. We're able to get you 50 cents. Let's be honest, 50 cents after a week's worth of pay can't even get you cable, so it's not going to change your life. But it is a part of the recognition process that I think that employees deserve.
Well, I've heard you say this before. Money is not a big motivator, but it is a huge demotivator. In other words, if I'm doing a better job than you are, but you get a bigger raise than I am, then I'm pissed and I'm going to take it out on my employer.
Sure.
And so I think when it comes to giving raises, you've got to exaggerate the point. You can't just tell employees keep your mouth shut about what you're going to get paid, because that never works.
Right.
You've
Never
got
works.
you've got to exaggerate. So you got to take your best employees and push as much money their way, and take your worst employees and take more away from them, so that the people with less look up to the people with more and try to emulate that behavior, or they leave. Either way, you win.
That's an interesting. I think that's a podcast for another day. But I do want
All
to,
right.
in the interest of time here, I want to leave you with one more quote from David Lee Roth. You know who David Lee Roth is?
I sure do. Jump.
Well, sure. Former lead man for Van Halen, right?
Exactly.
He once said, "Money won't buy you happiness, but it'll buy you a big enough sailboat to sail right up next to it."
or as I've always said, money won't buy you happiness, but you could be miserable on a nicer side of town.
Yeah, there you go. And on that note, I think we're going to have to call it a day. That's a wrap.
That's a